International, our voice in the world.
This is the English service of Radio Algeria International. It's time for the news.
The Ministry of Health in Gaza has said that 9,000 or over 9,061 people have been killed since the beginning of the Zionist aggression on October 7. UN experts, including the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the occupied Palestinian territories, said in a joint statement issued in Geneva on Thursday that the Palestinian people face a grave risk of genocide. And the President of the Republic, Mr. Abdelmadjid Tebboune, has announced a national initiative to combat cancer as part of his commitments to protect and promote the health of the citizens. Those were the headlines, and now the news in detail from Radio Algeria International. First, in our news, the Ministry of Health in Gaza has said that over 9,061 people have been killed since the beginning of the Zionist aggression on October 7. The figure includes 3,760 children and an additional 32,000 people who have been wounded. The Director General of the World Health Organization, WHO, Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus, said he couldn't find the words to describe the horror unfolding in Gaza, calling for the humanitarian response to be maintained. Ghebreyesus said that it might be too late to help the dead, but help could be provided to the living, to those who live in constant fear, to the wounded civilians, and to the nearly 200 women who are expected to give birth every day. Let's listen to him.
More than 10,000 people have been killed, including more than 8,500 in Gaza and 1,400 in Israel. 70% of those killed are women and children. More than 21,000 are injured, and more than 1.4 million people in Gaza have been displaced. The situation on the ground in Gaza is indescribable. Hospitals crammed with the injured, lying in corridors, morgues overflowing, doctors performing surgery without anesthesia, thousands of people seeking shelter from the bombardment, families crammed into overcrowded schools, desperate for food and water, toilets overflowing and the risk of disease outbreaks spreading, and everywhere fear, death, destruction, loss.
Meanwhile, UN experts, including the Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the occupied Palestinian territories, said in a joint statement issued in Geneva on Thursday that the Palestinian people face a grave risk of genocide. They called on Israel's allies to assume their responsibility and act to prevent it from taking this disastrous path. They expressed growing horror at the Israeli airstrikes against the Jabalia refugee camp, describing it as a flagrant violation of international law. UN experts, including the Special Rapporteur on the human rights situation on the occupied Palestinian territories, have said in a joint statement issued in Geneva that the Palestinian people face a grave risk of genocide. More details in this report by our colleague Saad Bougazi.
We remain convinced that the Palestinian people are at a grave risk of genocide, wrote the independent experts mandated by the Human Rights Council, but who do not speak on behalf of the UN in the midst of the war between the Zionist entity and the Palestinian resistance movements. The time to act is now. Israel's allies also bear a responsibility and must act to prevent it from taking the disastrous path, the expert statement added. They expressed growing horror at the Zionist airstrikes against the Jabalia refugee camp. They saw this as a blatant violation of international law. The UN High Commissioner for Human Rights said on Wednesday that Israel's bombardment of the Jabalia Palestinian refugee camp in the Gaza Strip could amount to war crimes. Attacking a camp sheltering civilians, including women and children, constitutes a total violation of the rules of proportionality and of the distinction between fighters and civilians, said the experts, who considered that the bombardment of this camp is a very narrow and densely populated area may have caused hundreds of Palestinian deaths and injuries, according to certain reports. They also called for the immediate release of all civilians held captive. All parties must respect their obligations under international humanitarian and human rights law, the experts stressed. We demand a humanitarian ceasefire to ensure that aid reaches those who need it most. A ceasefire also means that channels of communication can be opened to ensure the release of the hostages.
And a Zionist air raid has killed a journalist working for the Palestinian Authority's television channel, as well as 10 family members, according to the Palestinian television network. Palestine TV accused the Zionist entity of carrying out a deliberate assassination of Mohammed Abu Hattab as it bombed his family's home in Khan Yunis in the south of the territory on Thursday. Said Bougazi reports again.
Sources at Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis said at least 11 people were killed in the strike. The statement said an airstrike hit Abu Hattab's apartment shortly after his arrival. It asserted that the attack is a bloody message to terrorize Palestinian journalists intended to stop them from conveying the suffering of the Palestinian people and exposing the crimes of the occupation. The channel said it would continue to carry out its duty no matter how great the sacrifices are and no matter how many crimes the occupying state commits against our journalists. The Palestinian Journalists Union says that 27 of its members have been killed in Gaza since October 7th. Local and international media representatives in Gaza used to work from offices in Gaza City. However, intense Zionist bombardments, which destroyed many buildings, have forced news organizations to send their teams to the south of the enclave, even as Zionist airstrikes hit targets across the entire territory. The conflict is raging for the 28th day. Since October 7, the Zionist occupation forces have relentlessly pounded the besieged Palestinian territory and sent in ground troops, with Gaza's health ministry saying 9,061 people have been killed, including 3,760 children.
And the Organization of Islamic Cooperation has called on the international community to seize the 106th anniversary of the disastrous Balfour Declaration of November 2nd, 1917, which led to the Nakba, or catastrophe in Palestine, in 1948, in order to correct this historic injustice against the Palestinian people. In a press release, the OIC also called on the international community to assume its responsibilities to put an end to the occupation and allow the Palestinian people to regain their legitimate rights, namely the establishment of an independent state within the borders of June 4th, 1967, with Al-Quds as its capital. And the Palestinian embassy in Algiers has warmly welcomed the holding of a special session of the National People's Assembly in solidarity with the Palestinian people in their struggle for freedom and independence, and in the face of the barbaric Zionist aggression they have been suffering since October 7. The embassy expresses its deep gratitude to the National People's Assembly of the People's Democratic Republic of Algeria and warmly welcomes the holding of a special session of the Assembly, as well as the important speech delivered by its chairman, Brahim Boughali, in which he has expressed his support for and solidarity with the Palestinian people in their struggle for freedom and independence and in the face of the genocide perpetrated by the Zionist occupation, which enjoys American Western protection. The embassy also thanked Brahim Boughali, the members of the Algerian parliament, the committee chairman, and all those who took part in and organized this honorable session. The ambassador of State of Palestine to Algeria, Faiz Abu Aita, says the following.
We commend the political support of President Abdelmajid Tebboune for the Palestinian people, who said that the Palestinian people are not terrorists and will never be as such. This is the biggest political support in a clear position expressed by President Abdelmajid Tebboune at a time when the West, the United States of America and Israel tried to incriminate the Palestinian people and the Palestinian resistance. This courageous Algerian position comes to show that the Palestinian people and its resistance are not terrorists and will never be as such. Thanks to Algeria for all the support it provides to the Palestinian people.
Now, the President of the Republic, Ms. Abdelmajid Tebboune, has received messages of good wishes from several heads of state on the occasion of the 69th anniversary of the outbreak of the glorious War of National Liberation, according to a press release from the Presidency of the Republic. The President of the Republic received messages of good wishes from the Islamic Republic of Pakistan, the Kingdom of Belgium, the Republic of Malawi, the Republic of Hungary, the Republic of Austria, the Republic of Myanmar, and the Swiss Confederation. The President of the Republic also received messages from the President of the Islamic Republic of Iran, Ibrahim Raisi, the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin, the Turkish President, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the German President, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, the Chinese President, Xi Jinping, the Italian President, Sergio Mattarella, and Azerbaijan's President, Ilham Aliyev. The President of the Republic, Ms. Abdelmajid Tebboune, has announced a national initiative to combat cancer as part of his commitment to protect and promote the health of citizens. In a message addressed to participants in the 22nd Congress of the Arab Medical Association Against Cancer and the 15th Congress of Oncology held at the Abdel Farhal International Conference Center in Algiers and read out on his behalf by the advisor to the Presidency of the Republic, Mohammed Saghir Saadawi, the President of the Republic stated that this initiative is based on a series of objectives and programs that we intend to achieve in terms of prevention and early detection of this disease and the fight against risk factors. In this respect, the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune, has set up a national body chaired by oncologist Adda Bounejar, together with a team of specialists in the field, which will be in charge of defining the elements of the national initiative to prevent and combat cancer and for implementing it without delay. And the Anti-Cancer Center in the province of Jelfa, equipped with modern facilities and specialist medical staff, represents a real glimmer of hope for cancer patients in the region and neighboring provinces who will no longer have to move to the north of the country to receive treatment for this disease. The major medical facility recently inaugurated by the President of the Republic, Ms. Abdelmajid Tebboune, is a dream that came true for the people of Jelfa. The hospital is part of the President's commitments to the local population during his 2019 election campaign. And finally, to the Western Sahara file, where the Algerian National Committee for Solidarity with the Sahrawi People has said that it is convinced of the African Union's capacity to participate in the decolonization of Western Sahara in accordance with the principles of the continental body's fundamental law, insisting on the Sahrawi people's right to resistance using all legitimate means to put an end to their suffering. The details with our colleague Saad Bougazi again.
The CNASPE stated in a press release following the adoption by the UN Security Council on Monday of Resolution 2703 concerning the conflict in Western Sahara that the Sahrawi people's right to resistance by all legitimate means is indisputable and also remains the only serious way of moving towards an end to the tragedy that the Sahrawis experience on a daily basis under the indifferent eye, if not sometimes with the complicity of certain parties of the international community. The African Union is now called upon to apply without delay the provisions of the Constitutive Act to which the Sahrawi Arab Democratic Republic and the Kingdom of Morocco are signatories, and which clearly sets out the rights of the Sahrawi people and condemns the behavior of the Moroccan regime. The AU can and must contribute to the decolonization of Western Sahara, the last colony on the African continent, reads the press release. The CNASPS also notes that the UN Secretary General's report on the situation in Western Sahara presented to the members of the Security Council contained objective observations and reflections giving hope for positive and serious openings in the assessment of the situation by the members of the Council, likely to make the file evolve in the legality of international law.
And with this, we come to the end of this news bulletin. Time now for our special program devoted to the situation in Gaza and in Palestine in general with my colleague Asya Bakaras for me. I'll meet you again tomorrow for a fresh edition of our news bulletin. Thank you.
Western media has majorly depicted the ongoing aggression on Gaza in the form of a shocking attack on the Israeli occupation. The coverage was largely in line with Western foreign policy trends regarding the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, which do not describe the occupation for what it is, while removing the character of resistance or national liberation from the Palestinian resistance movement. Many of these coverages were sugar-coated with an explicit emotional tone when it came to the the Israelis, as was evident in written and spoken expressions in a clear propaganda that serves the Israeli agenda. This comes while the Hamas media office denounced the Western media coverage that does not show the reality of the atrocities committed by the Israeli occupation against the Palestinians, stressing that the media office of Hamas is working on showing the reality of the massacre committed against Palestinians in Gaza as it is.
Actually, we are calling all medias in West countries, in Arab countries, in African countries, in Asia countries. We are talking with them. We are explaining our stand, and we are making contacts with many countries in diplomacy field to explain what we are facing in Gaza Strip. We are facing great actions and great aggression on our people.
Flagrant bias of the Western media in line with their government's position did not prevent streets to be flooded by protesters waving Palestinian flags and calling for the end of the Israeli occupation of Palestinian territories. Thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters gathered in the U.S. Capitol this week, marching past the White House to hear chants of a free Palestine as the death toll continued to climb in the genocide committed against Palestinians in Gaza. Across the country, Americans have held pro-Palestinian protests with crowds gathering in Los Angeles, New York, and Michigan, home to one of the largest populations of Arabs and Arab diaspora in the United States. In the United Kingdom, rallies took place in Manchester in northern England, Edinburgh and Glasgow in Scotland, and London amid police warnings against anyone showing support for the Palestinian resistance. Demonstrations in support of Palestine also took place in Switzerland's capital, Geneva, in northwestern Italy, and in the Irish capital, Dublin. Meanwhile, thousands marched in solidarity with the Palestinian people in France, defying the government's flagrant ban of pro-Palestine demonstrations. In fact, several politicians around the world resigned due to their government's position by the side of the Israeli occupation, denying the rights of the Palestinians to peace, security, and fundamental rights. Among these officials was Liam Jones, a British former Labour MP living in Wales, who resigned this week from the UK Labour Party because of Keir Starmer's support for the Israeli aggression against the Palestinians. In her letter of resignation from the party, Ms. Jones said, "The last straw has been Starmer's explicit support for the Israeli collective punishment of the population of Gaza, despite this being a war crime, a fact of which he should have been fully aware of." She went on saying, "When I joined the Labour Party in 1974, we opposed apartheid in South Africa. Now it is not allowed even to mention that the Israeli occupation is an apartheid state, a view endorsed by Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, as well as those with experience of apartheid in South Africa." Meanwhile, Cliff Haswell, a former chair of Cardiff North Constituency Labour Party, has also resigned. In his letter of resignation, he said, "Sadly, the response to the recent escalation of violence in the Middle East has exposed the Labour Party's complete abandonment of its moral authority and any sense of duty to defend the most oppressed." He said, as the party leader gives unequivocal support to the Israeli occupation in its clear mission to eradicate Palestine, he has committed the entire Labour Party to this evil cause, not in my name, he said. He went on saying, in a stunning disregard for international law, the Israeli occupation is to be uncritically supported in continuing with apartheid, blockades, expropriation of land, and now a crime against humanity through the starving and bombing of 1 1 million children into oblivion. Irish MP Richard Boyd condemned the silence and reservation of his government when it comes to Israeli crimes against Gaza, stressing that bombarding Gaza and cutting water and food from the population is a flagrant war crime that cannot be sugar-coated with words like unacceptable.
Taoiseach, you said it is not okay for Israel to attack civilians, attack civilian infrastructure, to threaten to starve the people of Gaza. It most certainly isn't okay. It's a war crime. The Israeli government have brazenly, publicly and openly declared their intention to commit a war crime and have commenced that war crime against the people of Gaza, saying that they intend to starve of food, electricity, water 2.2 million people. That is a war crime under the 4th Geneva Convention. They are raining down thousands of the most sophisticated missiles known to humanity onto the most densely populated area in the world, carrying the certainty that almost every missile will incur civilian casualties, will and are destroying the infrastructure, the water infrastructure, the energy, making Gaza uninhabitable.
The ongoing aggression on Gaza is not the first aggression that witnesses Western MPs as standing in the face of their biased governments to claim the right of Palestinians to a state, peace, security and humanitarian assistance. Another British MP, Andy MacDonald, criticised last March his country for trading with the Israeli occupation despite the latter's theft of Palestinian resources to carry out commercial deals with other countries and crimes against Palestinians in the West Bank.
In the West Bank town of Hawara, over 400 settlers, backed by Israeli soldiers, torched Palestinian homes, businesses and vehicles and killed 37-year-old Sama Aktesh in what senior IDF commanders have called a pogrom. Israel's Finance Minister Smotrich, who describes himself as a fascist homophobe, openly said Hawara should be wiped out. Mr. Speaker, such extremism has given licence by a lack of international accountability. So will the Minister, if he agrees with the rule of international law, commit to banning all goods sourced from Israeli settlements illegally built on occupied Palestinian land?
During the week, Palestinian UN Representative Riyad Mansour said at the Security Council that Palestinians are not subhumans and the airstrikes are nothing but a flagrant war crime taking place in defiance of international law. He deplored the fact that Western media and governments start reacting and condemning only when Israelis feel a small proportion of what Palestinians have been taking for long decades.
Regrettably, history for some media and politicians start when Israelis are killed. Our people have endured one deadly year after another. We came to the Security Council month after month, warning of the consequences of Israeli impunity and international inaction. Last October, about a year ago, we stated before the Security Council the Palestinian people will be free one day or another, one way or another. We chose the peaceful way, the one the international community advocates for. Do not let Israel prove us wrong for our sake and theirs. This is not a time to let Israel double down on its terrible choices. This is a time to tell Israel it needs to change course, that there is a path to peace where neither Palestinians nor Israelis are killed. And it is the one diametrically opposed to the one Israel is embarked on.
He also disclaimed Israeli allegations and justification for the blockade on Gaza and on the ongoing assault, stressing that when Israel's supporters say that it is defending itself, they are in fact giving the Israeli occupation a green light to kill and add to the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza.
Israel keeps saying the blockade and repeated assaults on Gaza are to destroy Hamas, military capabilities, and ensure security. Clearly and expectedly, its blockade and assaults accomplished neither. The only thing they did accomplish was inflicting terrible suffering on an entire civilian population. It is time for an immediate end to the violence and the bloodshed, and it is time to end this blockade and to open a political horizon. When Israel now tries to justify yet another assault by the same faulty premise, no one should say or do anything to encourage it down this path. We know only too well that the messages about Israel's right to defend itself will be interpreted by Israel as license to kill, to pursue on the very path that led us here. 370, and the number is rising by the moment, of Palestinians that have been killed already in one day, including children, some barely a few months old. Entire families were killed in their sleep. Will this bring security? Will this advance peace? Where is the international protection the Palestinian people is entitled to when the occupying power violates international law and harms those it is obliged to protect? Aren't Palestinians' lives worth saving? The Palestinian civilians killed, the Palestinian children killed in occupied Palestine could have been spared. Isn't that a moral and legal obligation and a contribution to peace? Why nothing is done when those killed are Palestinians? We need to think hard of what logic we want to see prevail here. If this is about